The sleeper must awaken. The sleeper must awaken.
Huh? What? What is it? Is it time to go have a holy war against the Imperium?
No, it's time to do the podcast.
Ugh. Gotta be honest, I'm a little disappointed.
Two middle-aged guys try to work it all out. Two middle-aged guys try to work it all out. Two middle-aged guys try to work it all out.
Well, hello, dear listener. Welcome to Two Middle-Aged Guys not engaging in a holy war against the Imperium.
No.
We're figuring it out today. As always, with me is my good friend
Chris.
Recently, you have changed your name to Denis Villeneuve, right? In
well,
honor of the famed director Denis Villeneuve.
So yes, I went with the French pronunciation of his name as opposed to the El Paso, Texas. I don't know what that last one.
Denis Villeneuve. Yes, he has a Tex-Mex place. Great chips and salsa. The first basket's free.
Yeah, and then after that, that's reasonable. So before we get deeper into the Denis Villeneuve conversation, I take a little umbrage in the fact that for two podcasts in a row now, you've introduced it as welcome listener, as singular.
Did we get a second listener?
I mean, the numbers speak to having at least two.
All right. Well, I mean, I guess unless my wife listened accidentally twice.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that.
Oh, okay. I was speaking listener isn't broadly like the category, and not just, that one lid. Well, it works both ways. Fine. Welcome, listeners, both of you. So happy to have you here with us.
We've just doubled our listener count.
That's right.
That's fantastic.
Let's get those. Let's get some Hello Fresh ads running. Get that revenue in. If you're listening to the show and you heard that cold open, you're like, what are these two on about?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what we're on about. We're on about Dune.
Would that be Arrakis, Dune?
I'm not done.
Planet? Oh.
It would be Dune, Arrakis, Desert Planet, series of novels, 3 movies, a TV miniseries, an almost movie, a movie that wasn't made, and now a podcast. I'm done.
That's okay. Good. Thank you for delineating all of those things.
Well, I mean, Dune's a big topic.
It is. It covers a lot of ground, covers a lot of mediums.
A video game. That's true.
We need to redo
Start over. Gag doesn't work the second time. So we talked about it being big, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so I would frame it as being like Lord of the Rings big, Harry Potter big. Maybe not as many words in print, but it's a universe that is quite large. And now, it's a decade ago, no one was talking about Dune.
Right.
I mean, no one, right? Only the most ostracized of us were talking about Dune. But now, thanks to Denis, it's back in the forefront. It's part of the zeitgeist. It's the new sci-fi rage that's sweeping the nation. Now's a good time to talk about it. The second one just came out, Dune Part 2.
Yeah.
And so I thought, let's have a conversation about it. Let's talk about our experience with Dune. Let's figure out what is the best Dune.
Okay.
Why don't we just talk a little bit about broadly what it is, right? And I guess we should, spoiler alert, right? And this is we've done this here recently with other topics, but we're gonna spoil Dune.
Yes.
Now I think we'll be cautious about things after that first novel because there's a really good chance Villeneuve, I'm never going to say his name right, Villeneuve, is going to go beyond that. I think there's a good chance. So I think we should be careful.
I'm glad you said that because I was not going to be.
Okay.
But now I will.
We can dance around it, right?
Sure.
I mean, I tell you, it's odd and abstract enough that you can get things... You can talk about it without spelling it out, and people would be like, I don't believe that anyways.
That's true. But for the purposes of this conversation, I will have one brief thing to say about Children of Dune, and then we'll leave the rest of it alone.
All right. So what is Dune?
Well, Dune was a novel written by Frank Herbert
1965.
Yes, and it was very popular. It was, I believe, it tied for the Hugo Award that year.
It tied.
It tied. I can't remember what it tied with.
Wow, that must be a really good book.
It was, and I can't believe I didn't include that in my notes, but I did look it up, and I'm pretty sure it tied with another novel. Too bad we have no means of looking things up in our lives. But anyway, so it was a very popular book. It did well. It was known as kind of a literary darling very early on in its life. I mean, it got a lot of attention and accolades, and a lot of people really respect the novel. Famously, J.R.R. Tolkien hated
not like it.
Dune. Yeah, he could not stand it.
I think one of the reasons why it was thought so highly of because it was not pulpy. Even really good science fiction, your Asimovs, your Heinleins, they were pretty darn pulpy, whereas this was pretty serious subject matter in Dune.
This was also the point where science fiction started to, I don't want to say be adult, but it started to deal with topics that were not just like spaceships and ray guns.
Right. It was out of the space opera, zip-zap stuff,
right,
and it was into the politics, the religion, the ramifications of a society that's spacefaring. You mentioned Tolkien. It's a very good little note, right? You have two creators of worlds, languages, culture, societies. Tolkien did not care for the book. I remember in the quote that he said he didn't feel like he could give it a fair shake because he was still a working author being published, and he didn't want to like critique somebody, but he did not particularly like it. I would suggest that he didn't like it because Tolkien is optimistic and Herbert was fairly pessimistic, but it's interesting.
That's what my research led me to conclude as well, because there's a famous quote from Herbert about the book, and I think this will do a lot of bearing in our conversation today. But he said, the point of Dune is, quote, don't trust leaders to always be right.
Yes.
And Tolkien was very much in the fairy tale, hero's journey kind of thing, where your good guys were good guys and your bad guys were bad guys.
They were tall and handsome, and no, really, right? They were your striders.
Although the hobbits were short and handsome.
Yes,
but yes, that was Tolkien's world, and then Herbert is intentionally messing with that, and I think that rubbed Tolkien the wrong way. So
don't trust the charismatic leader.
Right.
Don't trust the religious leader, the leader that leans into religion. Yeah, very different.
Yes. But so that's a little bit of the history of the Book of Dune. You want to go into kind of the world and the plot, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, well, so, I mean, it's set in the far, far future.
10,191.
10,191 by the Butlerian accounting of time. There was 10,000 years prior to that, which we would consider the AD time.
Wow.
That is counted backwards. So it's roughly 20,000 years in our future.
You just out-nerded me.
Year zero in that, I believe it's called the BG, or I can't remember what, but the year zero in that is the Butlerian Jihad. Listener, please come back. We'll talk about something else. No, which was a very important part of Dune. But yeah, it's set super, super far in the future, far enough where, humanity is starting to change. It is a spacefaring society, an imperium across thousands of worlds. It's never specified how many. I think at one point they called it the Imperium of Endless Worlds or something like that, which, but it was a big imperium. And it is a feudal society. There's emperors, barons, counts, dukes. I mean, it's, there are religious, quasi-religious organizations, mercantile organizations, guilds that run the economy. There is noble houses and great houses, minor houses. One of the interesting things about Dune as compared to pretty much all other sci-fi was that there are no thinking machines, right? So AI, before we were calling it AI, there was a ban on those. So their computers were rudimentary. They did exist, but they were rudimentary, which meant that they had to train the human mind to be computer-like, or the mentats.
So it's very interesting that this story takes place so far in the far-flung future, but it's really, there's a lot of old, almost romanticized elements to it.
Yes.
Where it feels almost more like history than it does like science fiction.
Sword and swashbuckling and
exactly.
Pirates and
it's
scoundrels.
It's a wonderful juxtaposition that Herbert does to make this at the same time so completely foreign, but also familiar. And that's one thing I always loved about Dune. I love the fact that it took place so far in the future that it was like, okay, all bets are off. Like we can do anything. We're not beholden to anything in society or anything that we know. We have virtually no frame of reference, and then Herbert gives us the frame of reference then to build his world off of. And I always thought that was really fascinating and very unique.
Very unique.
In the world of science fiction. You don't often see that level of imagination. Most of them are like, well, it's our world, but set different kind of a thing. And Herbert was just doing his own thing, blazing his own trail.
So the story of Dune, about all these houses, there's one noble house that it follows, which is the house of the Atreides. And there is one commodity in this universe that is more valuable than anything, and that is something called spice. And spice is like their drug, right? But it's a drug. It expands consciousness. But its main thing that it does is that it allows for safe interstellar, possibly even intergalactic space travel. Because the spice expands consciousness to the point where people can see the future, and then it allows, because there's no computers, they can't do these complex calculations of how to map between one galaxy and another. They have to use superhuman minds, and specifically the ability to see into the future, to be prescient, and to see, they use that to navigate. And there's one place in the entire universe where this spice is found, and that is on the planet Dune, or Arrakis. And the story goes into this noble family, the Atreides, taking control of their new feudal territory on Arrakis, and all of the craziness that ensues from there. There's some rules to this world that we need to talk about, I think, in order to make the story make sense, right? Because you think about science fiction, like where are your laser guns, where's your hyperspace and all that. They don't have hyperspace. There's no C-3POs in this world, because the ban on thinking machines, I believe it says, thou shalt not make a computer in the mind, in the mold of a human, or something like that. So they got all there are rules, right? They have personal body shields. They have swords and knives, those sorts of weapons. They have projectile weapons that can pierce the energy shields. They don't use laser guns much, because when the laser guns and the shields interact, it can create massive explosions that mimic a nuclear explosion. They have nuclear weapons, but they don't use them. They reserve them for a potential darker alien threat. Basically, aliens in Dune never come up. No spoiler there. They never come up, but they believe that they could, and so all of the noble houses have their own sets of atomics, as they call them, and they keep that to protect themselves, but they don't use them on each other, because there's this form of war that they engage in. It's very important that they don't risk large-scale open war. It's costly, it's counterproductive. So they do like these war of assassins type things, where they're poisoning each other and sliding poison blades in between their ribs, and traps and counter traps, and they call this canly. If you read the book, it's talked about. But these are the sorts of rules, and there's all of these different schools and houses, and the Mentats are the smart computer-like people, and the Bene Gesserits is this female order of witches is what they call them, right? They got their super martial artists, and they've got the sword masters of Ganaz and the Suk school doctor. I mean, their stuff, folks, it's craziness, all the stuff that's in there.
Yeah, and I admit that I kind of really nerd out on that kind of stuff.
Oh, I do too.
I love it when stories have, things have 16 different names in stories like that. And going back to Tolkien, he does the same thing in Lord of the Rings.
He sings it to you too.
Well, that's a different story. But anyway, I love that in fiction. Like it seems like such a neat thing to do in a story, and it kind of mimics the real world, because we've got so many different terms for so many different of the same thing in English, and so the fact that that Paul's got 3 different names, and they're used, each one is used in a different context. I find that stuff really fascinating, and
it's just like when you want a sandwich, a sub, a grinder, or a hoagie,
it's all the same thing, but they're all these different words for it.
It's rich. And it's very lived in.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And there's not a lot of new stuff in this world. There's a lot of old stuff, a lot of stagnation, which is part of the story. Part of that sleeper has got to wake up. But it is a rich world, and there is a term for everything.
And that gives everything an identity.
It does.
Mean, like when you're, the Gom Jabbar. Okay, well, in any other book that would have been like my needle thing. But
my poison needle thing.
Yeah, but Herbert gives it, and that's one thing that I think science fiction can be very good at, which is being evocative. And we've talked about A New Hope has that moment where Obi-Wan says, your father fought alongside me within the Clone Wars, and then never mentions the Clone Wars again. And it isn't until we found out what the Clone Wars actually were that it became disappointing. Before that moment, that was like, oh my gosh, that must be the most amazing thing in the world. And Dune carries that forward. It does,
and there's so much detail in there.
Yes,
and you can drive yourself nuts just trying to sift through and figure out what's important, like what's Chekhov's Gom Jabbar. Is that going to come back up? Don't, because just enjoy it, because it's all really interesting. There's no throwaways. It's all just interesting stuff.
And I would say that it's written very well.
Oh, very well.
Like it's not. I mean, it's a fairly lengthy book, and it's a fairly complicated read because of all the things we're talking about, but it never feels slow.
No,
it never feels over encumbered. Yep. So it's very.
It doesn't feel like you're working.
No, exactly right. Yeah, it's a very well told story, very competently written, and it's a classic for a reason.
Far more competently written than its sort of contemporary that it does get compared to, which is the Foundation series, which I like very much. But it's kind of artless and soulless and sterile, whereas Dune is everything but, right. It's full of emotion and religiosity, and very earthy.
One of the articles I read suggested that Herbert wrote Dune in part as an answer to the Foundation.
I've also read that, and I maybe sure, I mean, yes, I don't know. I mean, space empires and
sure,
but they both deal with the idea of trying to get humanity on a path. Maybe we're getting slightly ahead of us. There's so much here, but yeah, you're right. It's a rich world where you gotta have to learn your own. Like with Tolkien, you gotta learn a vocabulary, and to understand these things that are coming at you. And there's a few ways you can experience it, and how I found it, which was the same as how you found it, is David Lynch's 1984 Dune. I picked it up on it was one of those afternoon movies, right? It was fit into a 2-hour time slot. It was a 2-hour and 4-minute movie, so it was cut up all to pieces, made very little sense. And I remember thinking, I don't like this. This is not very good. And we had a mutual friend who's kind of a weird dude, and he really liked it. And I was like, oh man, this weird guy likes it. I don't know what the deal is. But somehow I think what it was is that maybe I watched the full version uncut, or maybe it was the extended editions that brought me into it. But then I learned to appreciate this movie, because you can't watch it with anything edited out. Every minute is just precious. There's too much story there. You'll be lost. You'll be lost even with it all there, right? But that first 84 David Lynch, a beautiful $80 million, which was just a massive amount of money at the time. That's how I discovered Dune. Your story is very similar, I think.
It is, except I'm pretty sure the first time I saw Dune was on the Sci-Fi Channel. Because they had that very early on in their existence. I'm sure that it was cheap
on replay.
Yeah, it was cheap to get the rights to it.
They just rented it at the video store and tossed it in the machine.
Started playing it.
Nobody's going to notice.
But so that was the first that I recall being exposed to it, and I think it was probably the extended version. I don't remember the Sci-Fi Channel running the theatrical cut that much. I think I was introduced to the theatrical cut when I bought it on VHS. And actually, this is going to be controversial, but I actually like the theatrical cut more than the extended cut.
And I'm still in this extended cut camp, but after we had that conversation, I really reflect on it. Like, I see what you mean. I just think I liked it because it's more.
Right. And it's got some really cool moments in it. And
it does.
But I think as a picture, as a film, it's more put together. as the theatrical cut.
Sure.
So even though I was introduced in the extended cut and appreciated it, because honestly, some of that information they give you in the extended cut helps you enjoy the theatrical cut more. And then if you read the book, then you're off to the races, and you can really understand everything that the movie's trying to do. So that was my introduction to Dune. And then after being obsessed with that movie and watching it over and over and over again, I was like, yeah, maybe I should read the book.
Yep.
And so I did. And
I think I'm not sure if I read the book first or if I read the book on the making of the movie first. I know I read both.
Yeah, that's a fair question.
Because I got this, this weird little back when you could get books about the making of movies. That was a thing.
I remember that.
But you couldn't just pop in the DVD and watch the behind the scenes footage, right? And I remember reading. I wish I remembered more about it. I'd go look that. See if that book. I'm sure it does. But yeah, then I remember reading the book and from the library and be like, oh, wow, there's so much here.
But I remember reading the book and thinking how close it was to the movie. And a lot of the experiences I'd had, because I've been a movie nerd since birth, basically. And if a movie was based on a book, I would watch the movie and I would read the book. And frequently they would be so different, or the book would be so much better than the film, that it would become this kind of experience. It's like, well, I'm just going to read the book and forget the movie. But when I was reading Dune the first time, I remember thinking, these are actually pretty close.
Yeah.
And now obviously they can't cover everything that they cover in the book and the movie, but I always felt like the characters were represented in the movie. The
settings, the costumes,
right, exactly, all those things. They get all that lore that we were talking about, and those
comes through.
It does. They use all of those things in the film, and I always thought that. I always thought Lynch should be easier on himself on Dune than he is.
Totally agree. I mean, it was a well-crafted film, right? It was just, you think about it, it came out a year after Return of the Jedi, and that's what people were used to. That's fast-paced, swashbuckling, good guys are good guys, and they get, instead, with Dune, and although it is a little bit more of a straightforward good versus evil story, there's a lot of politics, there's a lot of religion that's not just like this sort of, amorphous force, right? A lot of, like, you are the Messiah type religious stuff. And very mature themes that, that didn't sell a lot of action figures, even though I still want some Dune action figures. They're pretty hideous.
Them. Yeah.
They made them and they're hideous, but I would love to get my hands on a Sardaukar action figure on card. That would be really cool. I just think that the world wanted more Star Wars or Buck Rogers, that type of thing, and they just Dune was just not the story that they were ready for. It was just way too serious, not space opera enough.
Well, it's kind of interesting because it came out in the same basic time as Blade Runner. And Blade Runner was received in much the same way.
Yeah.
Whereas now you have fans of both of these films who really sing its praises because they've made the effort to appreciate them. In the first brush you have with Dune the film, it's a little difficult to understand what's going on.
It is.
You get that there is this hero figure, and you get that there is fighting, but all of the manipulations and the plans within plans and all, all that, there's a lot. It's a dense movie. And so, like how audiences didn't really respond to how dense of a movie Blade Runner was until later, and you could get it on home video and you could watch it over and over and over again for people like us who would do that you really begin to appreciate it. So it honestly, this is jumping ahead a little bit, but it shocks me that Villeneuve's Dune was popular. Like when I heard they were doing a remake of Dune, I was like, first of all, who's financing that?
Right. And we're never going to get the second one.
No, exactly. And the fact that the world has reacted to it so strongly and so positively, that I'm baffled by that. Like, I never in a million years would have thought that A, Dune would be remade, and B, that it would be huge.
Good point. I definitely wanted to double click on that. I hate that term. I can't believe. Oh my goodness! I want to apologize to everyone for saying double click. That is a stupid thing to say. I want to go just a little bit. No, we're going to leave it. That's my humiliation. We'll go a little deeper on that because that's a great question. How the heck did they decide to revisit this property? So 84's Dune. I did, by the way, recently get to see it in the 40th anniversary. It was it went to some theaters, and I got to see it locally, and I loved it on the big screen. Yeah. I will say this, though. It's hard to watch movies from a certain time period on modern sound systems because they're so treble heavy. It felt like, a pencil was being stuck in my ear at times just because the mix is not right for the type of theaters we have now. It just an interesting observation. They're very bright, those mixes from the 70s and 80s are.
Well, next time I have an opportunity to see a film like that in a theater, I'll have to pay attention to
Listen for it. I absolutely picked out. I was like, oh boy, that's, that's kind of hurts to listen to. Okay, so there is a thing in Dune. We talk with the world's leaders, the weirding way, right? Yes. It is like it encompasses kind of like a little bit of a martial art, the voice, which is the ability to control others with your voice. That's why they call it the voice. Think about Obi-Wan when he's like, those droids, they're not the droids I'm looking for. But think about it like that if he also sounded like Batman with a voice changer.
Right. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and that's cool, right? But Lynch needed, this is my take on it, and I have no authority, but this is what he needed to find a way to make it more than just that and to work cinematically, and it'll take some shortcuts, right? To say, okay, weirding way is a legit thing. The weirding way allows Paul to train his new fighters, the Fremen of Arrakis, and get him a new weapon. So it's the weirding module is a thing that turns your voice sound into energy, destructive energy. It's this cool little thing that's, this little box that they hold in their hand, and they say things like "Shah," and then your heart explodes and whatnot. I thought that in a book like Dune, not necessary. In a movie, it really worked because it helped tell that story in a way that was visual, especially when Lynch only had a couple hours. So that was a David Lynch creation. I love it, and it's one of my favorite things about the movie.
So I'm a fan of it too. I think it's a neat little device. In some of the research I did, Lynch basically said the weirding way in the book is very martial arts heavy. And Lynch was like, I couldn't figure out how to shoot kung fu in a desert. Yeah. And so he's like, I needed a different method to do that, and came up with the weirding module. So as a filmmaker, I respect that he made that choice. Like, here's something that works very well on the page. It's not going to work very well visually, so we need to come up with something different. The argument that it's a piece of technology in a story that is very anti-technology in some ways. I mean, I think that's a fair argument, but I think it's a neat thing. I think it adds to Lynch's film version of Dune. I think it gives the weirding way a little bit more of a punch, which in Villeneuve's we're going to butcher that guy's name the whole time. I feel bad. But in his Dune, he didn't address anything. Like, the weirding way is basically not present in his films, which is a choice. But the fact that Lynch went this other direction, I think it's cool. And when I was a kid being exposed to all of this, and I'm reading the book, I'm getting to the very last page, and I'm like, why? Where are the weirding modules?
Where's the module? Why isn't he blowing up people's heads and stuff and yelling? All right. Cooler science fiction weapon, weirding module or lightsaber?
I gotta give it to lightsaber.
So do I. But I really like the weirding module. It's a close number 2.
It's very cool. Don't get me wrong. If somebody was like, "Hey, do you want this weirding module?" I'd be like, "Yeah, I'll take one."
Yeah. Well, sure. I mean, I would rather have that than the Ghostbuster Proton Pack.
Yeah, I would too.
There you go.
Because if you're not catching ghosts, what really cares?
Yeah, I guess cross streams, and I don't know I don't even remember what that does.
It's total protonic reversal.
Oh, well, which is probably bad.
Yeah, it's definitely bad. That was a segue.
Yeah, it was. That is part of the way it's shorthand. You could not do it, especially when you have that 2-hour limit that he had to respect for such a big story. I think he made a smart move that added something visual. It gave something to anchor the action, and helped make the Fremen seem like more of a threat.
Yeah, and there's a plot point in the book where the name Muad'Dib is referred to as a killing word.
A killing word, yes.
And it's a dual meaning in the novel kind of a thing. And I love that scene in Lynch's Dune where they're practicing with the weirding modules, and the one guy says,
Muad'Dib.
Yeah, he's like, Muad'Dib. He's just trying to get his attention, and the weirding module freaks out, and then of course Kyle MacLachlan is like, my name is a killing word, which is fantastic. So visually putting that in the picture and being that tuned to the details of the book, I give Lynch a lot of credit.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this 1984 film's cast because it is jam-packed with talent.
Yep.
And you got to start at the top. You got to start with Paul Atreides, Agent Kyle MacLachlan himself. Great casting, right? So in the book, Dune, Paul Atreides, it starts, he's like 15 years old. Never a fan of that in any form. I mean, I think of the Phantom Menace. I wish they would have found Anakin when he was like in his 40s, right? So I'm not a fan of like children characters of this sort. 15 is too young for this. MacLachlan plays him like in his early 20s. Excellent. Another change Lynch made. Absolutely necessary for the believability of the story. Kyle MacLachlan is just a great actor. When I think of Paul Atreides, I think of him now, in Forever, in his mop of hair.
Well, it was his first role, too. Did you know
Was
that?
it his first role?
It was his first role.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Lynch found him and cast him in Dune. And Kyle MacLachlan was a huge Dune fan growing up.
I did not know that.
So, and there are interviews of him talking about that where he was like, my first film, I've been trying to be an actor, and I'm cast as Paul Atreides, who, was from this book that meant so much to him growing up. So it's a neat kind of confluence of stuff that's happened. So he's a great Paul Atreides, I mean,
he is. Just a great actor. Everything he does, he brings something to it, right? And, he shows the transition of Paul from a trained young man of noble birth to a warlord, but it's not like a crazy, ridiculous night and day change. Like, I don't even recognize that character. The progression is, it's a little bit more stoic, and it's in line with the idea that he was of royal, regal lineage. And it works. His dad is played, Duke Leto. Atreides is played by Jurgen Prajna.
Let me take this one. Jurgen Prochnow.
He's okay. I mean, you know what? He's okay.
He's great.
He's okay.
He's great.
He's fine.
I've loved him in everything I've seen him in, which is Dune and In the Mouth of Madness. But I loved him in both of those films.
That's true. He is in The Mouth of Madness. He is. And then Richard Jordan is in it for about, you blink and you miss him, as Duncan Idaho, which people are thinking of the new movie now. They're like, well, Duncan Idaho is a huge part of the movie. Duncan Idaho is not a big part of the novel. No. Or the original, of the first novel, or the original movie. I mean, he's just barely there.
Right.
So if you're going to have someone barely there, sure, have Richard Jordan, whatever. Dr. Yui, one of the most important pivotal characters in the movie, maybe the best performance in the film, too, because you believe Doctor, you see it, you see that he's about to betray them, you see the tension on his face, he doesn't like what he's going to do, he feels like he has to do it. It's played so well by Dean Stockwell, who's one of Lynch's, in his stable of actors, was in his stable of actors. It's such a great performance.
Yeah, and a tragic character in the story.
Very tragic.
I mean, because here he's had the Imperial conditioning, which means that he's had extra training so that he will not betray the Duke, right?
Yep.
And then the Harkonnens have his wife and child, or just his wife? I can't remember.
Wana, just his wife is all that they've mentioned.
And they're saying, we'll kill her unless you betray Duke Leto.
Yep. And, he does what he has to with a lot of remorse, knowing it won't change anything other than it will give him the opportunity to potentially kill the evil Baron.
Yep. And then, and he also facilitates Paul and Jessica's escape.
Which Paul and Jessica would have died, so he did save their lives. So, we don't have anybody else in the cast that's interesting at all.
Really?
No, no one's wearing a codpiece.
I'm
pretty sure. Let me check my notes.
No, I think you're missing one.
No codpieces here.
Keep looking. It's kind of buried in the middle.
No, I keep thinking. Did someone yell, "I will kill him"?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, that's in there.
Oh, that's Sting.
Yes, it is.
Sting is Fade Rotha. I don't. They never say it. Do they?
Not in.
No, I don't think so. Yeah. The Baron's nephew, the Na Baron, he's going to become the Baron when the Baron, who's a very fat man, so fat that he can't walk, he can't motivate under his own power. He has to have anti-gravity repulsor things moving him around. He's played by Sting in a brilliant. Listen, Fade is a small part of the book, a very small part of the book. He's kind of sort of an important character, but Sting makes it so fun, walking around in his undies, and screaming and wearing that cool black outfit and, not being, and this is also from the novels, not being anything like his brother, Raban, Count Raban of Lankville, or like his uncle. He was a handsome, fit, twisted and evil, but he was not really fat. That's his defining feature. But it's so much fun. It's like, hey, there's Sting in his undies. He just shows up and he's smiling, and then later he shows up and he's screaming, "I will kill you!" and
brandishing a knife.
We've all been there, right? But we don't usually look as good as Sting does.
No, that's fair.
0% body fat on that man. You could count his pulse by looking at his arm. You could just see the veins move on his arms. Probably unhealthy, the weight he was at. And I would know. It's memorable. It's fun. It was great casting. It was not a role that required a ton of acting. It required presence. Yeah. And he has presence. Yeah. So, and not that I think Sting's a bad actor, because I don't, but he has presence, and it worked. And
he's got that crazy look.
Oh, he does
in his eyes.
The crazy hair, the crazy look in his eyes.
He really sells it.
Yeah, and he's a great contrast to the Baron and to Count Raban, who are just yucky, slovenly, pus-faced, eating like a chicken leg with grease dripping. Sting's like, I'm not going to have a cup of tea in my leather cod piece here, and then I'll have a knife fight or whatever.
And honestly, probably that performance is why I bothered to listen to the Police or Sting.
Oh, I'm sure.
As an adolescent.
It's a gateway drug, right? Dune is a gateway drug into listening to Sting.
But there's more of the cast we need to talk about.
Yes, I will mention just briefly, because there are more. We have the Emperor, who's played by Jose Ferrer. He's cast a bit old. In the books, the Emperor is like 70s-ish, but he looks like he's in his 40s, because another property of the spice, and he's a big-time spice addict, is that it keeps you young and fit. And he's supposed to look about the same age as Duke Leto, Paul's dad. They cast him a little old, Jose Ferrer. Jose Ferrer's a great actor. He's a very regal, older gentleman. It works. I'm fine with it. You got Virginia Madsen as Princess Irulan. Very, very Irulan.
Irulan,
yeah.
I think.
Very small role.
Yep. But very cool. Like, she introduces the whole movie.
She does.
It's very memorable.
Very memorable. And then, well, I'll let you talk about your favorite.
Well, Brad Dourif is in this movie as the Mentat Pieter de Vries.
Yes.
And he's just phenomenal in it, as he is in everything that he's ever done. I feel like I haven't talked about Brad Dourif enough on this podcast, so
let's let it roll.
Yeah, I mean, remarkable, really. Deserved Best Supporting Actor for this role and all of his roles combined.
Someone should give him a golden calf. No, wait, don't.
Yeah, that is the surefire way to having no career at all. But anyway, he's phenomenal in it.
Great evil, sneaky. His wordplay with the Baron, you could tell they cannot stand each other, but they need each other.
And he does this interesting like sign language thing, which he brought to the role.
Did he really?
Yeah, and he was talking about.
You know what? It's not in the book.
No,
because I'm rereading the book right now.
Yeah, it's and he and Lynch just kind of worked that out, and he was like, I think if I did something like this, I think it would be really cool. And Lynch was like, go for it, because that's how David Lynch talks. It's not a huge role, but it's a very interesting role. Brad Dourif, Sting, I don't remember the gentleman that plays the Beast Raban or the Baron, but that whole cast gives the Harkonnens in Lynch's Dune so much personality.
Yes.
They're at times comical, but also at times very, very frightening. And you can believe that these are just horrible, horrible people that would make this backroom deal to draw the Atreides to Arrakis and then stab them in the back.
And they needed that because the set for Gidi Prime is pretty weak in the movie. It's like a bad 70s office complex with cubicles and like a little sludge drain or something. It's not the best set.
That sounds terrifying to me. I would not want to be in that set.
And you got the dude who's taking care of the Baron's diseases. And
to me, that's
the heart plugs.
Yes.
Like heart plugs was not in the book.
You're absolutely right.
That was made up a little way to control people. But I actually have a heart plug installed. It was an elective procedure, but
maybe wasn't the smartest move.
Yeah, well, you know what? I got a discount on my car insurance.
That's fantastic.
No, I don't.
Do you have to milk a cat? Anyway,
for the antidote.
Yeah, exactly. No, but they're just, I don't know. Those little details make them so interesting.
Yes. And I always just thought that set was just the set, not as good as
But we don't spend a lot of time there, and it's basically just an opportunity to threaten Thufa. And then we're back on Arrakis. So, but I really liked all the additions that Lynch made.
You don't spend a lot of time on Caladan either, but what you do, it's very pretty, and that's kind of what makes it sad. Caladan is the planet where Paul and Leto they come and the mother Lady Jessica come from, right? It's this, in the book it's referred to as paradise. It's a lush, wet planet with oceans, rivers, lakes, and streams. Its primary export is agriculture, pundi rice, I believe. And then they go from that to a place, Dune, the desert planet, where it does not rain and where you're constantly searching, for moisture of any kind. Anyone else from the cast that well, I guess we should talk about Patrick Stewart, because he's a big part of the cast. Yeah. He was 21 years old in the movie and bald.
Oh my God.
I'm joking. He was 40. Okay. But he looks 70. Patrick Stewart has looked 70 his entire life. He's like 90 now and he still looks 70 or something like that. True. He was born old. And he's Gurney Halleck, and he's fine. Not my favorite character in the books. In the book, the movie, it's fine, right? He's a little campy in his portrayal, which is in the book some too, right? So I get it. And we'll talk about that, the contrast between that and the new, because Gurney Halleck takes a different direction in the new movies.
He does, very much. I would submit that Stewart is great as Gurney Halleck, and I don't disagree with you with everything you said about Stewart being in the film, but I honestly think we're bringing that baggage to it, because we know him as Jean-Luc Picard. Sure. We know him as Professor Xavier,
X, hanging out
and so when I'm watching Dune on the Sci-Fi Channel and he's just an actor to me, never gave it a second thought, and was in for the ride the whole time. And it's only then later that I was like, oh, that's weird that Captain Picard's in this movie.
Yes, and he looks exactly the same.
Oh, of course he does. Yeah.
I think that mostly rounds out the cast. Lady Jessica, I did not write the actress name. I feel terrible. She's lovely and really comes across as just like on the page.
Yes.
Paul's mother.
Sean Young is Chani.
Sean Young is Chani, yeah. Sean Young is a very forgettable actress to me, and she just doesn't. She's
fine in the role. No, you're right. She doesn't. She's fine in the role. I have no complaints with her. And then I'm not going to be able to remember the actor's name, but the guy that plays Stilgar.
Oh yeah, Stilgar, who is Ed from Twin Peaks. Yeah. McGill.
Everett
McGill. Yes.
Very good.
That was not written down. Hey, you know what? He's okay. Again, when you compare it to the casting that you get in the new movie, some of these are a little shaky, because you got Javier Bardem, not to get to it, and you're like, okay, Ed from Twin Peaks, yeah, you really look like a holy warrior. You got Javier Bardem over here,
No, I'm not going to argue that. You're right, but
sure, he's fine.
And the thing that I find remarkable about the cast, and I think that this is a David Lynch-ism, if you will. There are so many line readings in Dune that just live in my brain.
Yes.
And the way that they will say words, the way that they will execute phrases, it's so unique and it's so of that movie. And it doesn't exist anywhere else. And if you used it somewhere else, it would make no sense at all. But it works perfectly in the context of that movie. And I cannot imagine any other actor saying those lines as the cast that is in Lynch's Dune.
Very true, and I think that our sleeper must awaken thing, right? That is Delito Jurgen Perjnov, and that line, and I actually have it here. I'll just say it really quick because it is my favorite line of the movie. This is when they're on Caladan getting ready to leave. Duke Leto was speaking to Paul Atreides, and he says, "I'll miss the sea, but a person needs new experiences. They draw something deep inside, allowing him to grow. Without change, something sleeps inside of us and seldom awakens. the sleeper must awaken. That's a great bit. I mean, that's like Rutger Hauer level writing there. That's not in the book.
Yeah.
It's also not in the new movie. They give us like this weird sort of like, yeah, get up with the chickens, wake on up, Paul Atreides. It's just like, it is just not, it's like, if you're going to do it badly, just don't do it and call attention. Like, let's get on up at the crack of dawn in Arrakis and wake on up, boy.
I'm glad you said that, because there are several things in the new Dune that feel like Lynch's Dune. And you can say, well, they come from the same book. Of course, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about stuff like that, where Leto's speech in Lynch's Dune does not exist in the book, and in Villeneuve's film, there's an element of that in his film. There are so many things that I feel like, oh, you took that exact scene from Lynch's Dune and just made it 2021.
Before we move on from the movie, anything else to say about the movie? We're going to come back to it as well. I mean,
I will say one criticism that I think is valid is it does kind of throw out Herbert's thesis of not following your leader.
Yes, because of the way it ends the film.
Yeah.
Very different than how the new films are ended. But yeah, they turned Paul into the hero, right? He's saving the cat, right?
In Lynch's Dune, he appears to be the legitimate messiah of the Bene Gesserit and the Fremen.
Yes. I think that you got a 2-hour and 7-minute movie, and you got an $80 million budget. You've got to make a profit, or he's afraid he's never going to work in Hollywood again. I don't know if there's another way to end it.
That's fair. And certainly I think the 80s were a very different time, and I think the idea of having a story where the protagonist is not also the hero, I mean, that was still pretty ballsy of a move. And so the fact that we do get a Paul Atreides that is a legitimate hero, and he is right in everything that he's doing, it's not surprising. The other thing I'll say about Lynch's Dune was actually something that Jodorowsky said, and I know we'll talk about Jodorowsky's Dune in a minute, but he made a very interesting comment, which is he didn't get to make the Dune he wanted, but when he heard they were making Dune and he heard that David Lynch was directing it, he said something to the effect of, I'm glad David Lynch is a true artist and he's going to make a good movie.
Very magnanimous of
Jodorowsky.
It's not a hard J?
It's not a hard J. It's
like jalapeno?
No, it is not. It is a soft J. It's more of a yeah. Jodorowsky.
Weird dude, by the way. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah, very strange guy. But he said, so he was like, I'm glad that Lynch is getting to direct it. But then he said when he saw the film, he didn't like it. And as he's watching it, he's like, this isn't a David Lynch movie. This is a producer's movie.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of truth to that statement. So for me, even though I love Lynch's Dune, I think it's a phenomenal film. I think David Lynch is too hard on himself. I understand his opinions and how he feels about it, but I think he's too hard on himself. But I will say the tragedy of that film for me is that Lynch did not get to make his movie, because the true David Lynch Dune, that is a movie I would love to see.
I have a hard time wrapping my brain around what it would be, and I'm afraid that I wouldn't like it as well as because I like what we got so much.
That is a risk. He may have gone too far into David Lynch because it is his most restrained film out of his entire catalog. Dune is the one that he plays the most
external restraints. I would agree. The Straight Story is a very restrained film.
Oh, that's fair.
He imposed that on himself to
for
whatever reason make a brilliant movie.
That's fair.
But no, you're right. Externally, he was. You're right. He was very restrained.
Yeah. So
kind of surprising he actually did. I guess he was at a point where he felt like he had to.
Right. And he may have been right. I mean, he Eraserhead made a splash, and then he got Elephant Man, which was huge success. And then from there, he was offered Return of the Jedi. He turned it down, which I think was smart. And then he took Dune, which I don't know why he took it. Like, it doesn't seem like his kind of thing.
It doesn't.
But I'd love to see his true, unfiltered interpretation of Dune. I think it would be something definitely worth discussing, if nothing else.
Yes. I would love to see it as well. We mentioned Jodorowsky, right? I got that right. Let's just talk about that. So before there was Lynch's Dune, there was another attempt in the 70s to make this story into a film by a weirdo named Jodorowsky.
Alejandro
Weirdo Jodorowsky. And he had made a couple other films. I think the two that I am aware of are El Topo.
Yep.
and Holy Mountain, which are just, I've never been able to finish either of them. I can get about 5 or 10 minutes into it, and they're like, this is just too much, and I turn it off. And there is a documentary. You can get it on HBO Max. I had not watched it until we were doing this episode. You said you need to watch it. It's like, fine. Because I did not like Jodorowsky. I did not, my attempts to watch The Holy Mountain were it's so vile and weird. I just did not think I could do it. I really enjoyed that documentary. I enjoyed the what if.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the stories about like approaching Pink Floyd, about the whole what if of making any movie that doesn't get made is a really interesting experience. When it's this movie, it's particularly cool. But yeah, it was a really weird take potentially that would have made nothing like the novel. I think at the end of the day, they might have had character names that were the same.
Sure.
But yeah.
No, I mean, it's definitely a unique interpretation of the source material. And based on some of the interviews I've read with Frank Herbert was thrilled with Lynch's Dune. And,
yes.
and as it was being produced, he was like, I am so on board with this. I'm so excited. This is the real Dune. And I think that statement is in response to Jodorowsky's Dune, because Jodorowsky was going in so many different directions. And
Leto was going to be castrated.
Yes.
That's all I need to say about where this was going. He wanted it to be an experience like being on drugs.
It's a strange thing. It's a fantastic documentary, as you said.
It's very good.
Totally worth watching. And I will say that it's a good thing that the movie didn't happen.
Yes.
But I'd watch it. I'd give it a chance.
I probably would.
Made.
Sure. I probably would, just to see his fade.
Well, Mick Jagger.
Mick Jagger, yes. I think that's worth the price of admission.
That's an interesting
alone.
Casting choice. Orson Welles is the Baron Harkonnen.
Yes.
I'm on board with that one. Salvador Dali as the Emperor.
No,
I can't get on board with that.
Can't get on board with that. Come on.
And Jodorowsky being a weird dude. Salvador Dali. Yeah, weird dude times 10.
Jodorowsky should have cast himself as the Emperor.
That would have made a lot of sense.
No, really, because he was about the age, and he had it's kind of funny. He's such a weird, crazy guy. He looks like somebody who owns, I don't know, a chain of hardware stores or something. He looks just really normal and presentable, right? Like a European businessman, not some crazy drug-addled weirdo dude making the Holy Mountain.
Yeah, but I've looked at some of his Dune book. I saw the documentary, and even having both of those experiences, I'm still not convinced that it wasn't just a fever dream that I had, because it's so out there. I mean, it's just really a bizarre thing. But as we're talking all things Dune, that's a part of the history.
You want to touch on the novel a little bit? I mean, we spent a lot of time on the movie, which is certainly a big deal. Touch on the novel. I'm in the middle of rereading it right now. I'm taking it kind of slow. It's such a great read. I've probably read it 10 times. I have read its sequel, most of it, and then I stopped. I won't get too into it other than I don't like where the story goes.
Yeah, it takes some weird turns. So I'll say that Dune, the book, I would recommend it to any fan of science fiction, any fan of reading. I think there's a lot to really enjoy about it. Dune Messiah, if you really liked Dune the novel, I say go ahead and read Dune
The
Messiah.
first half you will really enjoy. You might not like the second half as well.
That's fair, but I still think Dune Messiah has value. Children of Dune is, to me, where it goes off.
It goes off the rails, and apparently it just got worse and worse.
Well, that's what I've heard. I will admit that I've never read past Children of Dune, because when we get to Children of Dune, and I won't say the particular plot point that just I couldn't get my head wrapped around it. Like at this point, we are so far away from the story that I was promised in Dune, that I'm just like, I'm out. I can't. I'm not going to follow this. And I think Villeneuve kind of has the same opinion, because he's made the comment of, I may make Dune Messiah, but if I do, that's as far as I'm going.
Yeah, and yeah. I'd be interested to hear. I'd be interested to see what he does. I think he will. I mean, those movies printing money, right? So the book is split into thirds. Mm-hmm. The first third deals with getting up to Arrakis and the death of Leto. The second third is about Paul inside the Fremen culture. The final third is Paul's overthrow of the Emperor. Just curious, what's your favorite third.
It actually may be the first.
Yeah.
Third.
I love that world building.
I do too.
Love it.
Yeah, and honestly, that hurt me going into Dune Part 2 a little bit because I knew that my favorite part of the story had already happened.
Yes.
So I like that opening, and I will say that as a fan, that's kind of where I live. I tend to like the opening of things. I mean, like A New Hope is still my favorite Star Wars movie because it's the first one, and it introduces you to all the things.
It has the most Tashi Station.
It absolutely does. So I like that part of it. I think that's my favorite. And then honestly, for me, they go in order. My favorite's Part 1, and then Part 2 with the Fremen and the culture. That's my second favorite. And then the overthrow of the Emperor. I'm like, eh.
I would say 1, 3, and then the middle part. The Fremen are just, man, they're so into their rules. It's honestly, I'm a little nervous for Paul. Like, I'm afraid he'll accidentally, sneeze or something, and they'll kill him because you've wasted the water of life or what. It's a little much. I mean,
yeah. But I enjoy that religion building as well. I mean, we get a lot of insight. And it's brilliant the way Herbert does it because we get insight not only in the Fremen culture, but we also get a lot of insight into the Bene Gesserit during that section. And I find that stuff fascinating.
And the Bene Gesserit you find is this order that basically is the architect of religions throughout the galaxy and sort of planting their seeds of messianic characters so that wherever their future super being arrives, he will be accepted, whether it be on a rich planet like Kaitan, where the Emperor sets, or if it's on a backwater world like Arrakis. And you learn a lot about that. It's very interesting, plans within plans, the scope.
Right. And the way that affects the book is all of the Fremen's beliefs and all of their prophecies are just from the Bene Gesserit.
Yes.
So, it's, and the Bene Gesserit is an order that's all about control. And they're very patient people. They've been working, to get complete, total control of the galaxy for thousands and thousands of years.
For 10,000 years,
yeah.
the BG order was created after the Butlerian Jihad, where the machines were brought down.
And that just builds into what Herbert was talking about, which is, your heroes may not always be correct. They may not always make the right choice. And the way
or the right choice may be made by villains.
Yes, that's true. And that the heroes can actually just be pawns in the scheme of things. So all that's coming out in Part 2 of the book, and I find that really fascinating. And then you're still kind of hoping beyond hope that Paul pulls this out somehow. And then in Part 3, he makes the choices he has to make, and it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
No, not at all. Genocide usually isn't. Let's talk. We can come back to the novel, right? It's all getting mixed up because I definitely want to get to the new movies. Because for one thing, I want to go through the contrasts and some of the things I love and the things I hate, and the cast of the new movie. And we definitely want to talk about that. But there's a mini series.
Yeah,
the Sci-Fi Channel doing it again, just going back to the well. What do we own the rights to? Let's do a Dune miniseries. And I remember watching it, and I just remember thinking, this looks like a theater production, like a community theater production of Dune. Fade Harkonnen is wearing, he looks like he's wearing an outfit from the Double Dragon movie or something, just so cheesy.
Yeah. William Hurt.
William Hurt. I almost said William Holden. William Hurt is Leto Atreides. So Leto Atreides is supposed to be a man so inspiring that he brings the greatest warriors around him, the Duncan Idahos, the Gurney Hallecks, the greatest doctor, the greatest Mentat. William Hurt just puts me to sleep. It's such a boring choice. I watched it. I don't remember anything about it. I other than, man, what a boring piece of poop.
Let me go to my show notes here and let me quote what I wrote about the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries. Meh.
Yeah, I did I have meh here? No, I have my Double Dragon reference and barely remember it. And then Bill Hurt makes me sleepy.
I saw it when it aired on the
Sure.
Sci-Fi Channel,
I think
I've never revisited it.
No, absolutely no reason to. The costume, everything is just bad, wrong, cheesy. It does go into Dune Messiah, and then they came out with the Children of Dune.
Yeah, but they did not cover that whole book.
No,
they picked and chose what they wanted.
And I don't think I actually watched Children of Dune. Now that I think of it, I don't know if I did.
Yeah, you didn't miss
much.
But
no, I didn't. Now let's talk about Dune 21 and 24.
All right.
So I have a hard time separating these movies,
as you should.
Yeah, because it's one big story. It's like Lord of the Rings in that in that it's 3 movies, but it's one gigantic story.
Right.
And I think that's obviously, this is one book they split in 2, but the passage of, it just looks like they even filmed it all at once. I don't know. There's something about very smartly the way Denny did it. That's what I call him, he and I. We're on incorrect pronunciation of first name basis, he and I are. So it's one big story to me. And I have some very mixed feelings about this movie.
Okay.
Let's just talk a little bit about broad strokes. The differences between this 84 and the book. Obviously, weirding modules, that's not a thing. You get your weird little Sleeper Must Awaken ripoff that he flubs.
To me, not only the weirding module difference, but just the weirding way difference.
The weirding way, right? Because it's really becomes about the voice.
Yeah, and honestly, it's not even that emphasized.
Only in a handful of parts,
right?
Which when they're done, they are well done. Especially the early scene with Paul's mother making him, you know, if you want a drink of water, you got to use the voice to get it.
Yeah.
What is interesting, though, is the weirding way as a martial art, it kind of abandoned in favor of the Fremen just already being these, you know, super superior fighters.
Yes.
And you mentioned Kung Fu in the Desert Lynch struggling with that. That's not really shown in the new movies either.
No.
It's using the desert landscape against the enemies and popping up out of the sand. It's well done, but it's a tough thing to put on film.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that, because the way it's described in the book is, in my opinion, very visual, because it's talked about this martial art being such that, and it's the Bene Gesserit, so they're using like consciousness manipulation to do this art. And so the book describes it as people like popping up in different places,
appearing to move so fast that they're just like teleporting type things.
And we've seen The Matrix.
That's true. That's true.
I was shocked that in Dune Part 2, the weirding way was not a huge portion of the movie. I was shocked. Because it seems like someone as visually talented as Denis could knock that out of the park. And just to choose, I'm not going to do that, seemed very awkward to me.
Some other deviations. Alia the knife, not in it. I miss her, but I kind of get why they...
What they did with it was cool. I mean, it was a neat interpretation.
Yeah. She kills the Baron. I
know.
I know. You know, I was fine with it, right? As deviation, like, okay, sure. Artistic license.
It was at least a clever deviation. I'll give them that.
Yes. Here's one I have a story problem. So Duke Leto, noble man in the books and in the 84 movie, but he's not coming to Arrakis to free the Fremen. But in this movie, he kind of like, I'm here to, it's like, desert power. Sure, get it. Desert power is a thing, right? These people represent desert power. Got it, I guess, right? Still part of the book. But it's a little bit too much like that whole save the cat. I'm a great guy and I'm here to, I'm not your new oppressor. I'm your buddy. And I don't know, there was something about it that he was not as calculated and he didn't feel like as strong or as smart of a leader because he was leaning a little bit too much into the I'm here to free the Fremen as opposed to I'm here to use the Fremen to destroy my enemies and maybe become the emperor myself, which is what was in the book.
Right. What's his goal? You talked about how Jürgen Prochnow didn't do a lot for you in Lynch's film. There's that one scene which is brilliantly acted, but also brilliantly written because it compresses what you just said into a minute and a half sequence, which is they're touring the spice harvesters and there's worm sign. And Duke Leto lands the ornithopter and he's telling the Fremen get on, and the Fremen are like, we can't leave the spice. Or not the Fremen, but his workers.
Darn the spice.
Yeah, and he's like, no,
he didn't say darn.
No, he didn't. But he's like, the men are more important than the spice, and that was bonkers to everybody who worked on the spice harvester.
It's in the book.
So, fair enough.
No, right, but
the fact that
great scene though.
Yeah, and the fact that they use that in the movie, that encapsulates Leto's character completely. And it does it very economically, very smartly. And there was nothing like that in the new Dune.
I don't know. The scene with Stilgar meeting, maybe it wasn't. It was there, but
on the floor?
It spits on the floor.
Okay,
it was not deft.
That's more Duncan's scene.
That is more Duncan's scene, right? And We can get into that a little bit. I got two really, really big ones that I'm just going to, three really, really big. I'm just going to let go for the moment so we can talk more about the movie because they kind of sum up my issues with the film. Do you want to talk about the cast? You want to just dive into the cast of this new movie?
Let's do it.
Well, as a science fiction movie in 2021, 2024, it's absolutely stunningly beautiful.
It is.
And the set designs are beautiful, and I love the set designs from '84. And these are, I'm not going to say better in every way because I think that there's some of the set designs in '84, the still suits in particular. I love that trash bag Sardaukar outfits. I love that, although I did like the Sardaukar in the new ones. But I got to tell you, it hung with the '84 set design and costuming, which is, to me, that's a great compliment. And it looks like $1 trillion. It sounds great.
Yeah.
It is a well done, slick movie, and I think it lends in part of like why people are interested in seeing it because it looks
well. And Denis is a very talented filmmaker, no question. Come on,
I'm not a
to have made Blade Runner 2049 as good as he did.
I thought it was brilliant.
That was skill.
I think what is Arrival.
Yeah,
I did not care for that movie at all. In fact, it made me angry, and I thought it was cheap, and I thought he was just trying to like ride on Chris Nolan's Interstellar coattails and tell a story that was not as good. But anyways, I don't want to make this all about my main man Denis.
Yeah, I think he's a very talented filmmaker, and
but
so
the movie looks great.
It does.
And little flourishes he has, like when the Imperial, I think he's supposed to be guildsman, come to do the transfer of authority. I mean, that's not in the book, but that looks awesome. Yeah. And it's just, it's like, man, that should have been in the book. That's a cool scene. I enjoyed this. So let's talk about the cast, because I got some strong opinions both ways on this cast.
I do too.
Duke Leto, Oscar Isaacs.
I'm okay with that.
I'm not okay with that. I'm more than okay with it.
Okay.
I think, at first when I heard about it, I was like, oh, what, him? He can't play regal. He can't play mature. He doesn't. I think he's kind of short. I don't know. There was just like I was just in kind of a like, nah, it's not going to work. He's good. Yeah, he is great at the role, especially the way he was written. That beyond heroic sort of view that they gave Leto. I loved it, and I wish I could grow a beard like that. I'd have that cool pointy beard all the time. Timothy Chalamet. Boy.
I'm less okay with this
one. I am not. So I guess as a 15-year-old bratty boy, I guess. But Paul Atreides in the novel was never a bratty 15-year-old kid, right?
Yeah.
And I just think, I don't get what the deal is with this kid. I don't get why everyone thinks he's so great. I guess he's cute or whatever. I'm afraid when his voice changes, though, his career is going to be over. I just was not. Here's the thing. He did something in the second half of the movie where I felt like he did do some of the transformation that needed to become, the Paul, the Mo'adib Paul, the Kwisatz Haderach Paul. Yeah. And I was much happier with his performance in part 2 than I was in part 1. I think they just played up the whiny young angle too much. You could have left that casting and wouldn't have been happy with it, but with some better direction in the first half of the movie, I think it would have been better. And I just think that they were trying to make him look immature, and that was not the Paul from the story. The Paul from the story was not immature at all. Right. So, but I honestly would have done what Lynch did, and I would have, added 5 years to his age, which Timothy Chalamet or whatever. I mean, he's probably like 60 right now. I mean, there never is, But I would have cast older and just adjusted the story, and nobody would have thought, they thought any different of it.
Yeah, only people on Reddit would have called you on that.
Right.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't too thrilled with his performance in part 2 either. And there's one scene that just made me roll my eyes and kind of exemplifies why I'm not a fan of Chalamet in this role. It's the scene where, because he's basically deadpan through almost the entire movie. And there's this one scene where he's talking with Lady Jessica, and they're talking about the prophecy, and he has this 1 second extremely loud burst of anger that, and he says something like, "This was your prophecy," or something like that. And I just thought, man, that was...
Was that in the second movie, or was that when they're in the tent in the first movie?
No, it was in the second movie. It was the second.
There was some whininess like that too.
Yeah, no, this one is. I mean, he's literally just talking in that Timothy Chalamet, and then he just starts screaming at his mother.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was so clumsy.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's Denis' fault or if that's Timothy Chalamet's fault.
I think there's another example come up where it took a character and they ruined the character with similar unmotivated, similar weird motivations and unearned outbursts. So.
Yeah, so unearned outbursts. That's a very good way to put it. You know, and I just felt like through part 1 and part 2, I'm just not. Chalamet's not taking me where the character of Paul needs to take me. And so, you know, was it fine? It didn't ruin the movie for me. I'm not like saying, oh, this movie's terrible, but I'm not a huge Timothy Chalamet fan.
No, I'm not either.
I don't think he was a great Paul Atreides.
Let's do this too. Let's say whether or not we think the performance is superior to the original, on the same, or inferior. So I'll go back to Duke Leto. Superior. Yeah. Oscar Isaacs. Timothy Chalamet, absolute, not even close.
Yeah, inferior.
Next one on my list, Lady Jessica, Rebecca Ferguson. I don't know if there's better casting in a modern actress than Rebecca Ferguson.
She's phenomenal in the role. Now, before we dive into her performance anymore, I have a question about Lady Jessica.
Yes.
Because I cannot remember. I have not read the book recently. I didn't have time to revisit it for this podcast. You're rereading the book. In the book, is Jessica as manipulative as she is in this film? Okay.
No, that is one of my things that I have as a deviation and a concern. But no, Jessica did that to save her son.
Yeah.
She did not like this, oh, good, now I get to be the mother of the Kwisatz Haderach, right? Yes, that is a Vinny problem, and I'm trying to take that out of it.
Yeah,
because I like Rebecca Ferguson.
I agree. She's fantastic in the role. I had issues with what they did with the character.
Yes, but I did too. Yes, not the only one I'm going to lay into, but yes, they made her too happy to be the mother of the Messiah. She was. Or the Kwisatz Haderach, which is how she would put it, and she leaned into the Messiah for reasons different than just survival, which was what it was in the book. I'm going south, and anyways, I really struggle with that, and that plays into my biggest issue with the movie, which I'm sure you're seeing what that is. I was right. I thought, who else could play this role, Lady Jessica, and I really struggled. The only one that I can think of, and probably a decade ago, would have been Cate Blanchett. I think she probably could have played this. But this is a tough role to get right. You have to be strong. You have to be, one of the most beautiful creatures in the universe. And Rebecca Ferguson just nails it. So
she's good in the role, no question.
She is.
But is she better than 84?
84.
I really like 84.
Whose name I cannot remember. I am going to give it an even. Because
all right.
As much as I think that the French actress, who I am kicking myself for not writing down her name, was so good.
Yeah, she was good.
And the costuming and everything just helped. I mean, she looked like she stepped out of the novel.
Yeah.
Next one, Brolin as Gurney Halleck, the troubadour warrior. Former Harkonnen slave.
I liked his performance. Again, I'm not a huge fan of everything they did with the character, but I like Brolin. I think he's a good actor. I liked his performance as Gurney, and I'm going to say better than Patrick Stewart.
Absolutely. I think he elevated a character that was supposed to be important, but had too many silly little lines of him quoting songs and whatnot. But I thought Brolin came across as being like a legitimate, serious warrior who hates Harkonnens with a passion. He didn't just talk about hating Harkonnens, which is what Patrick Stewart did. And I kind of like Josh Brolin and everything.
Yeah,
so I am I definitely like the casting, definitely prefer it. Wellington Yui, Dr. Yui, the Suk Doctor, was played by Chang Chin, who's a Taiwanese actor. And I think my take is he got shortchanged by bad writing. And that they just totally sapped the emotion and the sacrifice, just did not give him the moment like they did like in the original 84. There's a moment where Jessica's kind of focusing in the way his lips are moving. It's kind of a weird, off-putting moment. You realize she's reading him. She's like, she can tell something is not right with you. He never gets anything like that. He's just, the most you get is he's hiding a message inside of an X-ray or something. And I don't know. I just felt like he was a character that was shortchanged, and maybe the actor could have done just as good of a job. Although Dean Stockwell's a great actor, so maybe not. But I felt like the whole character just not handled well.
Yeah, agreed. And nothing against the actor or the performance, but like you said, he didn't get the chance. So I'm going to give that one to Stockwell.
I didn't even write down the actor who played Thufir Hawat because he was a non-entity.
That is another thing that frustrates me about the new Dune is the way they treated all of the Mentats.
The Mentats. Well, yeah. Yes. Caveat. But Thufir doesn't get his moment.
No.
Thufir's incredibly important in the novel and in the 84 book. I mean, he is running the war machine, the defenses, the offenses, all the strategy, all the canly, underhanded stuff. He's doing that he is the computer and the personal consigliere, if you will, to Duke Leto Atreides. And he's barely in the movie.
Yeah.
And not even in the second part.
No.
You miss that whole, like, I need Baron Harkonnen needs a Mentats, and now he gets, he's going to take Thufir because Thufir's that good. He's got a method to control him with the poison and the cat's milking.
Well, that was a Lynch thing.
Was that a Lynch thing? Yeah. I haven't got to that part in my reading yet.
So in the book, they don't tell him he's poisoned. If I remember right, they don't tell him he's poisoned, and they slip the antidote into his food. And it's not so much a thing of control. It's if he tries to escape, then we don't have to worry.
We don't have to worry, but he's not a loose end.
Yeah.
But yeah, what a waste of the Mentats.
Yeah, it really was.
But they wasted the Guild too, right? The Guild was barely brought up.
Yes, they did. And I love the Spacing Guild in Lynch's Dune.
Yes.
So interesting.
Yep.
And you get the third stage Guild Navigator, which, fun fact, since we're just throwing those out there, the idea of tiers in the Spacing Guild and having the third navigator of the Spacing Guild be a mutated human because of the spice, that was Lynch's idea.
That a Lynch thing
and Herbert
picked it up for Chapter House.
He said, "I wish I'd done that." Then it appeared later in the novels.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, I knew that he did have some innovation around. I didn't know what all it was. So you mentioned Mentats. So Peter de Veers, of course, played by the great Brad Dourif. I think that David Dashmalan, I don't know that one. I like I love his portrayal of the character. I'm going to give it even with...
Well, I'm not.
I know you're not. But here's the thing, is he's not played as a Mentat. He's just played as a sneaky, smart guy.
Right.
He's not a Mentat, right? And it would have been so easy to the Juice of Sifu, right? Let's see. By the Juice of Sifu, the thoughts acquire speed. The lips acquire stains. The stains become a warning. By the Juice of Sifu.
It is by Will Alone.
It's by Will Alone. I set my mind in motion. Thank you. Yeah, one of the little.
Very good though.
Yeah, no, I haven't even got. I think I got to that part in the book, but I did because he's dead. But wait, is that in the book or is that just in the movie?
The speech?
Yeah.
Oh, I couldn't tell you.
Now I'm questioning. Anyway, but I do like David Dashmalan. I like that. I like his scene that they added where he goes to Salusa Secundus and recruits the Sardaukar, which he technically doesn't have to do because the Sardaukar do whatever the Emperor says. However, it's a cool scene, and it just says, "Here, look how bad these Sardaukar are. They're draining people or of their blood or whatever." Yeah. But I'm going to give it even because I also just really like David Dashmalan. I think he's a great creepy guy. Perfect casting for this.
So I'm going to fall on the side of Brad Dourif. So we'll just carry that on and move on.
All right. So if you're going to take Duncan Idaho, and you're going to make him interesting and give him things to do, you could do a whole lot worse than casting Jason Momoa.
You could.
And I think that I actually like what he did with Duncan Idaho.
I did too.
And I like Momoa's take on him and the physicality and the fact that he's, outrageously loyal to the Atreides. And Richard Jordan had nothing to do in the other one. It's not even a comparison. They're not the same character.
No. And in Lynch's Dune, the whole plot of Idaho going out and befriending the Fremen and collecting intel for Leto. It's one line in Lynch's movie.
It's one line.
And it makes a lot more sense when that's expanded and you see what's happening.
Much more clear the way Villamil, man, gonna have to. You should just insert the right name. He had 3 extra hours. He had two and a half, two 45-minute movies. He had a lot more canvas to work with.
Yes, he did.
But that was a critical part of the movie. It was way undersold in Lynch's version, and it was very well done. It's just too bad that Duncan Idaho is dead and can never ever come back.
Gosh darn it!
We'll leave that
crazy.
There, listeners. So I'm giving it to Duncan because Richard Jordan did nothing.
That's fair.
I think he was like, "Hey, Paul," and then he's dead. I mean, I think it's kind of like, Duncan, hey, oh, I'm dead.
That was pretty much how it was done in Lynch's version.
Stilgar.
Yes.
Javier Bardem just owns this role. Yeah. I believe I want to join Siege Tabar and be part of his group, and then we'll go, kill Harkonnens or whatever.
That's what you do. No, he's phenomenal in the role.
He's so good.
Yeah, and I love that guy. I think he's great in everything he's done.
Yes.
And then when I heard he was playing Stilgar, I was on board.
I was on board. The first thing I thought was maybe he'd be a better Duke Leto. That's one of the things that I thought. And now, of course, I think he actually could have been a fine Duke Leto. Don't get me wrong. But man, his Stilgar is
so good.
Ooh, yeah. I believe in him as a fanatical warlord who's come to believe that the Messiah is there in Paul Atreides and is going to lead his people to freedom. So yeah, we're in agreement.
Absolutely.
It's pretty. I mean, listen, I like Everett McGill as much as the next guy, but
Harvey Bardem, I get it. Yeah. I understand.
So we got the Baron, which we didn't talk about much in '84. It's kind of. I mean, he's such a big fat character. He's a big character. He's a big part of the ridiculous nature of this character. Evil in ways I don't even want to get into because controversial. Avoided in the new movies, if you notice, entirely. But Stellan Skarsgård's good casting for that, especially the way they chose to take the camp out and just have the menace and the grossness, but without the silliness of my lovely diseases. My Baron, let me poke your disease with this. I don't know. I thought it was good casting. I thought as much as I love Lynch's version and I love that version of the Baron Harkonnen, this one terrified me.
Acting wise, performance wise, it's completely on point, and it's better. I felt like the Harkonnens in general were underutilized in the new Dune. I wanted to see more of them. They somehow, and I can't quite put my finger on how, somehow in Lynch's 2 hour and 15-minute Dune, the Harkonnens are more of a threat than they are in Villeneuve's 4.5 hour Dune or whatever. And I'm not quite sure why. So I love the performance. I agree that Stellan Skarsgård is phenomenal. And he is terrifying. I just wanted more. I wanted them to go a little bit deeper into the character and into kind of what he was thinking, what he was scheming. And I didn't get that. And that frustrated me.
All right. So to contrast this with the next one on my list, which is Count Raban, who is in the movie a pretty good amount. Is played by Dave Bautista. Dave Bautista is a good actor.
Yep.
It was good casting.
Yep.
Even though Count Raban is getting fat in the books, right? It's even something Fade mentions. He doesn't want to be like, his tubby, his brother or cousin, I guess. But he was in it a lot. He got a bigger role in this movie than he did in the novel. I compare it to the other guy is hard because all the other guy did was ate chicken and laughed. I mean, really, he did not do anything. But it felt like they gave a lot of Harkonnen heavy lifting to Dave Bautista.
Yeah, they did. And part of that is appropriate because, he handles the day-to-day operations.
He was there to oppress the Fremen.
Right. But you don't see that. You're just told that. And then what you actually see of him is being angry that things aren't going his way and then getting killed in the shortest fight that I think has ever been put to film.
What a bizarre... And by
contrast, I mean, they took... they took all the time that they could have spent there, and they just doubled up Paul and Fade's fight. But we'll get to that.
It took longer for Josh Brolin's character to walk up to Raban than the fight actually took. I mean, it was...
which is strange to me, and I like Dave Bautista. I think he's terrific. He's a great actor.
Of the wrestlers turned actor, he's definitely the best. I think. You know. I mean, sure, Hulk Hogan's really good. Don't get me wrong. Tropic Thunder is not a Hulk Hogan movie. Thunder in the Tropics is the Hulk Hogan movie. Oh boy.
Anyway,
Hulkster's gonna have something to say about that.
I'm sure he's the second listener that we have.
Love that. Come on the show.
Yeah,
Terry Hogan, if that is your real name.
Anyway, back to Dave Bautista. Again, performance phenomenal. I just felt like they handled him poorly in the movie. But yes, no question, he is the better cast. Compared to...
I think they gave it some heavy lifting to him, and I just think it has nothing... I think he's just not that interesting of a character.
Well, that's what I mean, that he wasn't given... he wasn't used well. So, like, if you're going to give a lot of heavy lifting to that character, which, okay, I see the thought process.
Right. Give him a backstory.
Give him things to do.
Motivation.
Yeah, and when you're going to eliminate him from the story, make it meaningful.
So I'm kind of dancing around here because there's a couple I really want to talk about. Florence Pugh?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
Florence.
She is Princess Erlan. Irulan. Thank you. Great casting. I like her in everything she's in, and the extended role that she got, I think, was great. And I just really enjoyed her. I mean, it's hard to compare her to Virginia Madsen because Madsen had so little to do, and she had a lot to do. But I just like her in everything. So I guess
I had no problems with it. I really, for as little as Virginia Madsen did, I really like what she brought to Lynch's Dune. That opening it means a lot to me, and maybe I'm looking back at it with nostalgic eyes as opposed to you're really giving it a unbiased assessment, but I really, really like what she does in Lynch's Dune.
That's fair.
So I'm going to give it to Virginia Madsen.
All right, I get it. Did you like the extended role?
Yes, I wish it had been even more extended.
Okay.
I'm very frustrated with the way Dune Part 2 ends.
Okay, well let's just get into Emperor Old Musty Christopher Walken.
Good grief. I love Walken.
Sure, we all do.
He does not belong in this
He does not belong in this movie in any role, but specifically the Emperor role.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes no sense.
No.
It defies everything that was in the book, and even the older one that was established in 1984. Chris Walken looks 100 years old. He acts like he has some serious cognitive challenges, kind of shuffles around like it's a Saturday afternoon at home with some sardacar. Like, hey, I just don't like I don't like it.
No, I don't either.
And this is what I think. And I told you this. I think if I was going to do an older one, I would have cast Sting and said, I'm going to do a little connection here because Sting's regal. They could have, gave him a wig to kind of help out with the hair. And then they could have an older royal emperor. But as such, the character of the emperor, very conflicted, right? He loved Leto. He was like there was distant relation. He considered him a cousin. He thought he was a good, wise man, but he was afraid of him for lots of reasons, because of the way his heir situation was, because of his popularity in the Imperium and the Landsraad, which is the name of their houses, of their council of houses. So he was conflicted about what he had to do to Leto. This emperor, I mean, I think they tried to tell you that, but it just, you didn't buy it, because I'm not sure Chris Walken even knew what was going on. Bad casting.
And not only bad casting, and arguably not a great performance, but takes you out of the movie.
It does. Oh, there's Chris Walken.
Yeah.
It would be like having Stallone show up. He was like fighting a Sarda. Hey, let's go fight a Sarda guy. It really does take you out of the movie. And part of that is because Chris Walken is a caricature now.
Yeah.
He's no longer really like an actor that you can just slide into things.
Right. There would have been so many better choices that for whatever reason they didn't go with him. So we get Chris Walken.
Who's the guy, the bad guy in The Matrix?
Hugo Weaving.
Man, he could have played a great emperor.
Yeah, he would have been good. That's true.
I'll just toss that out there.
Yeah.
That's literally, I just came up with the top of my head. That's how many people, it's so easy to find a better one than Chris. Well, you could fall down and hit someone who's a better emperor than Chris Walken. So I guess we're in agreement.
We are in agreement.
That Jose Ferrer is
the better emperor.
So I'm going to talk about Austin Butler as Fade, because I got some real...
Here we go.
Austin Butler. Okay, first of all, you're a weird-looking dude, Austin.
Let's be fair. They did do different bone structure for Fade. Like a lot of that you see.
You're right. But, I've read the books. And of course, I read the books. And I, I'm 84. We all know Sting, right? Sure. At no point did they ever describe Fade Harkonnen as looking like evil Billy Corgan with black teeth. He was vain. He was not your typical Harkonnen. That doesn't mean he was good, but he had other ideas.
Right.
And instead, they just kind of made him like even ickier than the other Harkonnens.
Yeah.
Just skinny, but icky. What is the deal with the black teeth? That was just weird for the sake of weirdness.
My complaint with Fade in the new Dune is it's lazy.
Yeah.
And for a complex character with a lot going on, you could have taken that so many different directions and you could have run with it. And instead we just get the guy who's like, oh, he's evil because when he's handed a knife, he kills, the slave that's right next to him.
Right.
Like, okay, how many movies have I seen that in? And that's pretty much as far as they go with character development for Fade in this movie.
What would have been more challenging and more close to what was in the novel was to make him regret some of those actions. Mm-hmm. Because at one point in the novel, he is punished by his uncle, and he's made to kill all of his slave girls, and he did not like it. He felt some degree of remorse. Maybe remorse is not the right word, but it was not what he would prefer to have done. It would have been more challenging to make him a complicated monster.
Yeah. It would have been more interesting.
It would have certainly been more interesting. But you're right, lazy.
Yeah.
Very, very good way of putting it. And just weird looking too.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know.
The first time I saw a still of him, I'm like, oh no, Dennis, you have misread this character. Nobody wants the Emperor's not being thinking, I want my daughter to marry that guy who looks like he just crawled out of like Smeagol, like he just crawled out of a mine. I mean, that's not. No, that's not how this would have ever worked, right? And as the Na Baron, he was being set up for greatness.
Yeah, it was very bizarre, but I think it speaks to a problem that I've seen for the last 10 or so years in Hollywood, which is everybody is so lazy with their villains, and they don't give their villains the time to breathe or to be. Even to have questionable motivation. Like the entire point of Dune is this idea of the person we're following is the hero this whole time. Maybe he's not the heroic person that you have. Well, I think on the flip side of that is you've got Fade, who you're set up to understand that the Harkonnens are basically these one-note culture. And then you get Fade and you start to see, oh, there's more here. There's more on the spectrum than what I was led to believe. And you put those two things together and you start to really get complex situations that Frank Herbert deals with. And they just completely abandoned it. Now, I'm not going to say that the 84 Dune nailed that either.
No.
But Sting is way more interesting. In his portrayal of Fade.
Kind of hopping around with his knife. We'll kill him.
Because he's and you could argue that Sting's portrayal is way more psychotic.
Yeah. Let's just face it, we just think Sting's cool.
That's fair.
I mean it's just a huge part, but he was just cool.
Yeah, he was cool. And he brought, charisma to that role, which Austin, and I have no problem with Austin Butler. I didn't particularly like the Elvis movie, but I blame that more on Baz Luhrmann than I do anything else associated with that film.
Haven't seen it.
It's a Baz Luhrmann picture for
any knife fights?
No. Not that I recall. No. Anyway, I didn't have a problem with Austin Butler being cast, but again, I had a problem with the way they handled the character. But I'm giving this to Sting all day long.
All right, I'm going to go right in on this next one, and this is where the central problem with the ending, the second half of the second movie, and the ending of the movie, and that is Zendaya. Mm-hmm. I think she's a good actress. I think she was well cast. I think she is a better actress than who played Sean Young in the first movie. But they ruined her character by making her the voice of the rebel Fremen. That is not who Chani was. Chani was dedicated to Paul, bore him 3 children, one of which who died during the time period when the movie was set, that was not included in the movie. And so instead of making her the rebel, right, they had to have someone who was the voice of the rebel. And I think part of the reason they had to do that is because they made Lady Jessica pushing it so hard. She had to be kind of the counterpoint to that. And Paul was kind of moving between these two poles. Where's he going to align? I think that they ruined the character. I think that she could have still been his match, still been the love of his life while being a lady and not being married, just like Jessica was to her Duke. That was not an issue in the book. They understood it. It was just a formality. It was like paperwork. And I just felt like, I don't know why it bothered me so much, but she was his partner. In fact, in the movie, in the books following, it's not giving anything away, but once Paul has agreed to marry Erlin, Jessica and Chani do the negotiation with the Emperor for him abandoning the throne and for Paul taking over. She's that important to the future of the story. And for her just to wander off in the desert because she's not happy with Paul taking on the mantle of the Messiah, even though she does, she believes in those things. She saw him take the water of life. She saw the transformation and the abilities. It just did not make sense. It was unearned. It did not make sense, and it frustrated me. And I felt like it was the attempt to make her like the good guy of the movie because they needed a good guy because Paul was obviously not going to be that great. But Paul was obviously turning into a vicious Genghis Khan-like dictator.
Right.
I think I just said Genghis Kong, not Genghis Khan. No, the Genghis Kong. But I really struggled with that. I think you could have made it more complex and had the chips fall where they may and showed the struggle within Paul more without having to be told through Chani's point of view.
Yeah, I like a lot of what you said there. I'm going to phrase it this way. I think Denis kept waffling on who his main character was and who he wanted that to take that role. Because he takes you with Paul through part 1 because Chani's not there very much part 1 at all. But then in part 2, Chani is treated like the protagonist of the film, which is bizarre. And I agree, the changes don't frustrate me. It's the way the changes were executed that frustrate me. And I think you could have definitely told the story better and had it to be much more interesting, much more complex. And I was very frustrated because at the end scene, when they are talking about Paul marrying Irulan, I kept waiting for the moment of Jessica to show up and explain to Chani what's happening.
Yes, this is the way it must be.
Right, and that never happened. Right. And it was so bizarre.
Because they made Jessica full-on villain.
Right. And that's why they couldn't do that scene. So a lot of those characterizations were just very, very bizarre choices that came together in a way that I found very unsatisfying.
Yes.
And then when you've had this whole movie again where, Timothée Chalamet, his name's the biggest one on the poster, so I think that's who we're following. And then the film ends, like you said, with Chani going in the desert. But not only that, the film ends on Zendaya. Like a close-up of her and then credits, and it's like, wait a second.
Why?
Yeah.
This is not the main character.
I didn't get it at all.
And I think what they were trying to say is the resistance to Paul was the main theme of the movie. To me, the main theme of the movie is Paul had to take a terrible path because he wanted to live. Mm-hmm. And the only way that he could live was to go down this path and allow him to become this thing. And I don't know. I really was pretty. And I think if you had not read the book, if you didn't care about the movie, you probably wouldn't be bothered, or didn't care about the '84 movie. You might not have been bothered by it as much as we were.
I think it felt weird, no matter what. And maybe I'm again bringing too much baggage to it, but structurally, the way the film was laid out, that was a bizarre choice to me. And I agree 100% with what you said about Zendaya. I think she's great in the role. Certainly, since we're ranking them, she beat Sean Young.
Absolutely.
I just felt like her character was strange. And especially when there's that moment when Paul has drunk the water of life, and then she has to make a choice that makes her complicit in this whole process, yes. Right? And even in doing that, and there's a moment of mysticism about that scene where it's like, okay, my understanding of medical events in this movie, I don't think that should have happened. We are now elevated into a spiritual thing. It's almost like she completely blows that off, and like that has no bearing to her at all. Yeah. And it's just very strange. And I think where all these problems come from is this was their way of adhering to Frank Herbert's thesis statement. I just think they didn't do a particularly good job adhering to Frank Herbert's thesis statement.
So much of that second film, when you see Paul and Chani together, you can't tell if they like each other or hate each other, right?
True.
And that is not ever in question in the novel, or in 84, right? But I get it. You might want to make it seem a little bit more complicated, but there's also a certain point where you're like, well, I don't believe that these two will ever end up together. What, they have 2 kids? What, 3 kids? What? No, they clearly can't stand each other. It was an accident. I think that she's a good actress. She was well cast. They mishandled her character.
Yeah.
And I think I think you get her character right, and you potentially could have elevated this above 84. But what they did with her, that leads me, and I don't know, are we ready to lay down our cards?
I think so.
It leads me to believe that 84 is still superior.
I agree.
Although it's darn close, because Denny does a good job with many things. But at the end of it, the message is confused. Mm-hmm. Paul is no longer a character in his own story. Whether or not I get another movie, I'm not sure where it's going to go, where it's going to take it, right? And I can sort of see it picking up where, Messiah came in, because Messiah has some pretty complicated things in it. But Paul's lacking a point of view at the end of it, and just kind of is handing that over to the Fremen, to his mom, and Chani storming off. I don't know. It's just not Paul Atreides.
It was strange. It was a weird choice. I will say that at the end of part 1, I was so on board with Denis' film.
Yes.
And I was like, that was phenomenal. And, there were a couple of things that I would nitpick about, but above and beyond, it's great.
Yep.
And then I went and saw part 2, and I honestly walked out of the theater and it was like, I didn't like that at all.
I certainly didn't have that reaction. I felt like it was highs, and then all highs and a couple of lows that drug it down.
I don't know. I really thought, I felt like they took the easy way out on just about every decision that they had to make in part 2. And in part 1, you had these amazing sets, these amazing cast, amazing cinematography. And in part 2, it felt like we're abandoning all of that imagination and creativity. And these are just scenes that's playing out to a camera. And by golly, the only artistic shot I got was of a silhouette walking into the distance in slow motion, and I got that shot at least 47 times during the course of Dune Part 2. I'm not going to overstate it and say like, oh, it went off the rails, or it was terrible, or it ruined Part 1. I'm not going to go that far, but I really thought at the end of Part 1, this is a lock, and it's going to be amazing, and it's going to be the best interpretation of Dune ever. And I stand here today saying, nope, I'm still going to take David Lynch's.
Well, I'm with you on still taking David Lynch's, and having seen both of them in the theaters recently, and flaws and all with the Lynch version, of which there are some, I prefer it.
Yeah.
And the deviations, I for the most part like. I think that Denny made some errors particularly in that second film with the resolution, and it just made Paul seem a little too happy to go wage jihad.
Yeah,
which was not his thing, right? And I think Lynch just wisely avoided that, right? He wrapped up the film with, "Oh, it's raining."
Yeah.
Well, he is the Kwisatz Haderach, says the creepy little girl. And if you're just going to do it as a standalone film, that's the way you do it, right? And obviously, they're going to take this and going to do something further, but I think that they could have put an ending on it that maybe didn't make Paul heroic, but that also didn't make him, full on genocidal mass murderer, willing participant in it.
Right. And I think it's pretty simple. Like, you tone down Jessica, you make Chani a little more understanding, and you're there. Yeah. Honestly, I think that's all that you had to do.
And I think through Paul's visions, you give a vision of an alternative that was worse than this. Sure. So he had to make a hard choice. That's the thing, right? This was not something he wanted to do, but he had to do it because if he did not do this, all humanity could potentially be extinct.
Right.
And we're getting super, super deep in it. But yeah, it's a... Yeah, but you know what? I'm glad the film exists. I'm glad it got made. The question that you asked, how did it get made? How did this complicated property become a thing? And I'm gonna say I think Chris Nolan has shown that complicated movies can still print money. And they don't just have to be this late stage Steven Spielberg mindless stuff, that you can do challenging work that is still exciting, and even though it's ridiculously expensive, can get people into theaters. And I think that his and his type have done that. And I think that Dennis earned this because of his work on Blade Runner. Whether it earned it or proved that he could do it, I don't know. But it is an odd choice. But if you're going to go back and you're going to mine old science fiction and big stories, man, they've kind of run out of stories, right? I mean, Foundation is being done by Apple, but it's not that exciting. There's still a lot of Arthur C. Clarke stuff that you could do, like Rendezvous with Rama, but there's not a whole lot. I mean, Disney kind of blew up John Carter from Mars.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah. And you know what? But that's almost so old that I don't know.
I have opinions of that.
Yeah, we'll save that for the big John Carter episode. But I think that it was like, okay, let's give this property a shot. They probably got it for like $38, the film rights from the Dino De Laurentiis garage sale, and it worked, and they put the money to it.
Have you done any reading about the production of this? Because no. I feel like it had to have a champion. And I don't know if that was Denis or if that was somebody at Warner Brothers or what, but because I still have a hard time believing that Warner Brothers would greenlight this movie when they could look at two other versions that had been made, and like visually see how this might come together, right, and be like, no, we don't want any part of that.
I you know what? There probably was. I would doubt it's Denny. I don't think he had the capital then. He does now, right? I think he can be his own. I mean, I think he's now a dealer in that kind of power. But I'm sure that there was someone.
Yeah, I'd love to know the story of that in a little bit more detail.
I wish it was Chris Nolan.
It's not. Because
if
it were, his name would be all over.
It would be like, Nolan. Yeah, you're right.
Now, if Chris Nolan had made a new Dune, I don't think we'd be having the same conversation.
I don't know what we'd be doing. We'd still be trying to figure it out. Like this, we'd have a string board of different, okay, and then Paul did this, then he went back in time. There's time travel in Dune. There is now.
Yeah, we find out that every movie he's made has been leading up to Dune. It's all connected.
My gosh. Turns out Matthew McConaughey was the Kwisatz Haderach all along. All right. Let's pull up a cooler of spice up here by the desert.
I'd watch that.
Totally, yeah.
So anyway, this has been, man, I thought Twin Peaks was granular.
Oh my gosh, I knew. I warned you. I warned you. So this is going to be exhausting, and we're going to say the word Dune a lot.
So anyway, I've been pretty hard on the new movie, and there's a lot I like about it. Don't get me wrong, but this is a story that I've lived with since I was probably 12 years old. So it's, I have a lot invested in it, and I think it could have been better.
So I think one thing we can both agree on that we figured out, Christopher Walken, unforgivable is the emperor of the known universe.
That was rough. That was a rough choice.
Well, folks, thank you for sticking with us. I don't know how many listeners this took. Yeah, we assumed. You probably could have read Dune in the amount of time, but thank you. And next time we're gonna spend 9 hours talking about the Silmarillion.
Oh gosh,
did I pronounce that right?
The Silmarillion.
The Silmarillion is an off-brand one that they made in South America in the 80s.
Well, it's similar.
It's similar, very similar, with Gordolf and Balbo. All right. Well, we should probably just leave it with an epic mispronunciation.
Have a good night, everyone.